Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we have with us a very special guest. His name is Mitchell Osmond, and he's a trusted advisor, a leadership consultant, executive coach, and host of the Dad Nation podcast. He's got over 15 years in senior leadership, and he helps high-performing men achieve success where it matters most, at home, in their health, in their happiness. And while enhancing their career success, Mitchell has guided executives, entrepreneurs, and driven professionals to bridge the gap between career achievement and personal fulfillment. And this fits just right on in with healthy living. Mitchell, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Joe. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to having this conversation, brother.
Likewise. We were talking a little bit before, and just recently we had at my nonprofit Gardens of Hope a men's circle, and that was the first time we did something like that. We've worked with women's groups before, all sorts of different groups, but I really feel that men working on themselves is an important, needed element in humanity right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's actually exactly why I started the Dad Nation movement as well, because I noticed, I was a byproduct of that, struggling. I was 60 pounds overweight, and we were 100 grand in debt. My marriage was on the verge of divorce. It was a very difficult time, and I suffered in silence for a long time.
That's what we do.
Before I had the courage to reach out, and when I did, and when I got myself around a community of men, everything changed. And so
Nice.
I'm a byproduct of that work, and so I couldn't agree more with you, Joe.
I love it. So, I lost about 50 pounds about 8 years ago. And, I found myself in and out of financial problems and marital problems. And, I've always sort of found my way through it, but I've always reached out and strove to build a community. And that's really what this podcast is all about, is building a diverse community and, with the elements of all these different groups intact, that we can, branch off and work on ourselves. So I'm really excited that you went down this one road, because you know how it is. You take on too many things and you can get so much done, but when you keep your focus more narrow, you can really move mountains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So tell me how you went from there. It must have been a moment where, you realized, holy shit, I'm in a bad place. And like you say, we suffer in silence. It's what we're taught to do, just sit there and take it. And at one point you're like, that's not working.
Yeah. And I think it's a great starting point for the conversation. And for me, that turning point, there were two for me, actually. The first one was a fight. And the second one was a funeral. Okay. So the first one being the fight, I want you to picture with me, I was sitting on the couch with my wife, and we had been married for 3 years under this point, and we had a huge fight. It started off fighting about money, and then it was something else about me not being present, and it spiraled. And to give you some context, we had been only married for 3 years, but it was a very difficult season. We struggled through the whole 3 years, but this fight, this day, was different. And I knew deep down that if I didn't change something, this was all going to be over.
Yeah.
We had always said we'd never use the D word, divorce in our marriage, and that day is the first day we did.
Wow.
And to give you some context, leading up to that day, I had recently been let go in a senior leadership position. My career was everything to me, Joe. It was my calling, it was my identity. It was all wrapped into that. So I spiraled into depression. I was 60 pounds overweight, like I said, 100 grand in debt. I was medicating with drugs and alcohol every day to try and just cope, and now I was getting dangerously close to the divorce. I was checked out, stressed out, burned out. And I didn't quite understand, Joe. Like I was so powerful at work.
Right.
And I was powerless at home.
Right.
Like I could go to work, I could build organizations, I could lead teams, lead board meetings, but I came home and I didn't even know how to talk to my own wife.
Yeah.
And there was this tension that I was facing, and at times it felt like there was like this, I was two different people. There was this duality that I was wrestling with, and I knew where I had come from. I knew that I wanted something different, but I just didn't know how to make the change. And I mean, where I came from was, I mean, I was raised in a dysfunctional home. I had a non-existent relationship with my father. Alcohol, drugs, crime, abuse were just littered throughout my family. And so the problem was that I was letting these unhealed wounds bleed into my marriage, and I began to torpedo my life as a result of this unhealed trauma. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't transform your pain, you will transmit it." And that's what I was doing.
That's the truth.
I was transmitting my pain to those that I love the most.
Sure.
And I could when I would yell, I could hear my father's voice in
Of
me,
course.
his words. And so that was the first point, that big fight. And then 1 week later was the second turning point. And this was the funeral part of the story. Now, I was invited to sing at the funeral of this very wealthy philanthropic man. And I'll never forget, after talking about all of his accomplishments and all he did in his life, I was sitting side stage and I was getting ready to sing the last song. And I heard the minister ask the congregation, he said, are you living a life worthy of imitation? If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And Joe, for me, I was trying to get myself together and sing the last song, and I could barely choke out the lyrics because all I could think was, if this were my funeral, nobody would be saying they wanted to imitate my life. Nobody would be saying, I want to have a marriage like his, or he inspired me to get into shape, or he inspired me how to steward my finances well. They would probably say he struggled and then it was over, and it was a sad reality. And that's the thing about funerals, is people tell stories because that's all that they have left. And that day, Joe, I was determined. I said, by the time I leave this church, I'm going to start writing new chapters to my story. This ends with me. And so I immediately, within a week or so, I started reaching out to men in my life, and they surrounded me. Men who my ceiling was their floor. You understand me? People who were living where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
People who would not only show me what's possible, but they would hold me to the standard that I said I wanted for my family.
You were blessed to have those people in your circle, though. That's incredible.
Yeah. And so
not everybody does.
Yeah, exactly. And so within 18 months, a year and a half, I paid off the $100,000 of debt, completely restored our marriage, paid off lost the 60 pounds.
Nice.
It was totally clear, focused, and free of distractions, alcohol, all that stuff. And then what happened? I mean, those were my two turning points. But then I started helping friends around me, guys who were also struggling in their marriage or in debt or had a hard time losing weight, or, you name it.
Right.
And then one of my mentors challenged me. He said, man, if you really want to have impact, you want to leave a legacy, or live a life worthy of imitation, start a podcast and start sharing your story with the world.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And so I just, out of obedience, I did that. And within 18 months, the Dad Nation podcast was globally rated top 10% across the world. And today I have over 33,000 listeners.
I love it.
And then some of the people started chiming in and being like, hey, would you help? Would you coach? Would you teach me what you did? And I'd already been doing it with all my friends for free along the way.
Yeah,
so I said, sure. Exactly. So then I launched the coaching practice, Dad Nation, the coalition. And so now I just do coaching and executive advising to high-performing men who want to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness.
I love it. That's what a beautiful story.
Yeah, that's what got me here, man.
So what's the timeline on this? Like when was it that you were at that funeral? How long ago? This
would have been about 8 years ago.
Okay. All right. So you're about 6.5 years into this journey where you're at now. That's fantastic. Wow. All I can say is I'm proud of you, man.
Thank you.
What a great story. You clearly have a legacy that you're leaving behind now. And you're so young, you're still just getting started.
Yeah. Just warming up.
I love it. I love it. So tell me a little bit about your family. This is a dad podcast, so I'm assuming you have some children.
Yeah, for sure. So that's interesting because before I was a biological father, I held many father kind of roles, and I know you'll
Mhm.
probably find this interesting. But because of the fact that I had said I came from this dysfunctional family, part of that was my older sister. I was the baby boy of two older sisters. One of them ended up marrying an alcoholic and another alcoholic, and so on and so forth. She had three daughters, and all three of them struggled with drug addiction, suicide ideation attempts,
Wow.
alcoholism, things like that, anxiety. And so at different points, me and my wife took in three of my nieces to help them recover from their addiction or from their anxiety. Or, I've picked up one of my nieces several times from the like a mental health institution where she had attempted suicide. And so before we
Wow.
even became parents, we had years of experience walking alongside these teenage girls and showing them what love looked like, showing them how to respect themselves, showing them what a healthy family looked like. And before I even became a dad. And so I'm actually a fairly new father. Like, we have one son, he's 20 months old. He's almost two
Oh,
years old now.
wow. You're just getting
Yeah.
started. I love it.
Yeah, and so I've been taking everything that I've learned along the way and just been pouring into him, and at the end of the day, man, that's why I started this. It was kind of for selfish reasons because
It's all
I
good.
I said to myself, if I have any shot at being a great husband and a great father one day, then I need to surround myself with other men who are doing the same thing, who are going after the same goals, and so the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so that's kind of how I got into this space, because I want so badly to be the best husband I can be, to be the best father I can be, and to leave a legacy that's worthy of imitation, so that my son one day, when he grows up, and should I have a daughter, she will grow up to. I'm going to do my best to model greatness for them, because we know statistically that, for example, if I have a daughter one day, she's going to grow up to crave the attention of a man that looks just like me. And so
It's
my
true.
my best chance at, if I want my daughter to bring home a great man one day, I need to model that greatness for her so
So
that she
true.
can recognize it in someone else when she sees it. So that's
That's
my mission, man, and that's why I'm
love
here.
it. I love it. I love it. Wow. So one of the things that you've brought up, you brought some amazing points up. You clearly are walking your walk. You understand. We as we go through life, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I've been paving my own way, building things and crashing and burning, picking up. It's a different route. I've done a little corporate stuff, but for the most part, I'm just a figure it out myself guy. But along the way, my goal has always been to be my best me and to be the best father, now the best grandfather and husband and all of this. I got 30 years under the hood with my wife, and we've got some great times and some not so great times. They when you say those vows for better or for worse, well, that's life. And I
Mhm.
think that that's part of, the part they don't tell you about with any of this stuff is you're gonna have hills and valleys no matter who you are, no matter what you do, whether you're rich or poor or sick or well, all those things, those vows actually have meaning and just like life. But there are things that, like you talked about in your community, like I can remember my mom telling me, about the kids, my friends I was hanging around, and she always tried to make sure I had, good people around me. And that's so important. We think that we're autonomous and we think that we think for ourselves and all this, and we do. We make our own choices, but we're so influenced by the people around us. And when you find somebody that's depressed or lost or chaotic or destructive or whatever the issue is, drugs, alcohol, whatever, that stuff bleeds into you like no
100%.
like in no time, because we connect with these people that are with us and we start sharing our energy, our thoughts, and before you know it, our habits. And I'm became well aware of, I hung out with some people that weren't so good for me, and I looked at the direction. You sit back 50 years later, and you're like, oh, wow, I can see the course. It's like you're driving around on a boat that's not got a real strong engine, and you kind of direct your course, but a little wind blows, and you go off that way. And I really think that this community, like I've felt a calling to build a community all my life, and I've struggled. I picked wrong people, and people come and go, and but finally, I think I'm building something solid right now that I can feel the strength of it, and the things you were talking about, people that fit into all sides of it. There's people that I can help, and there's people that are helping me, and it's like a big cable. We're all holding on to it. We're all being pulled up a little bit, and we're all pulling the guy below us up a little bit. And I think when you can have that, whether you build it or find it or land in it, however it happens, or even just recognize that we all have that to some degree, and recognize the value of it, and engage it, maybe, is the key. There's such a tremendous value in that. Like, just to have somebody that holds you accountable is such an incredible power, because doing it all yourself is so much work, and it's just too easy to let go for a minute
Hmm.
and give yourself a day off, but you can't. There's no days off, right? I mean,
Hmm.
when it comes to morals and values and doing things right, you're either doing it or you're not. There's no, God doesn't have days off. We don't have days off. It's not like that. And I think it's important, like, some of the support groups for alcoholics or drug abusers or suicide, depression, whatever it is, you have a sponsor or somebody that you can call up when, you have a moment of weakness or whatnot. It's that same principle. I'm not particularly the guy that supports those kind of things directly. Everything works for everybody differently, but the idea of a sponsor or somebody who is there for you, I think is just huge. I think that's a huge piece. And then also, when somebody looks to you for that role, like you say, when you teach, you learn. When you're held accountable, you stand up, and you represent, because
Hmm.
it's a different thing when you're the only one relying on you, or that other person is like looking to you going, "Hey, am I doing all right?" Well, you got to be standing tall when they're looking at you for that. So I think both ways are really, really important in guiding us. First we got to decide what we want, and want that road that we're on, or that they're on, so we can travel with them, and then help the next one travel down it with us. But once we make that decision, that doesn't necessarily make it easier. It just means we
No.
kind of know where we're at when we're going through the stuff. And there's a sense of security, a sense of comfort, um, a sense of just standing on solid ground when you know there's somebody there, that you can rely on. Maybe that knows that they've been through what you're going through, or maybe they know how to, we go through these journeys where we're just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna make these decisions as I go. But there's something that says, well, there's this guy here. If I run into this really difficult spot, I can say, hey, what do you think? I think
Hmm.
that's just absolutely huge. So I really want the listeners to get the impact of that, because I really think that the podcast is amazing, because you now have an avenue to share your experiences with 30,000 people. And you just don't ever know how far that's going to reach, who that's going to reach. It's like I always say, those of us that are trying to make change for ourselves and others, we're like a little lighthouse. You got a little light on, and it's going on. But as you reach more people, the light gets a little brighter,
Hmm.
and more people can find you. More people can find answers. More people, you can do more good.
Hmm.
And in turn, you learn more, and you can provide more, and it just keeps growing.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think the challenge, though, so many, especially men, and I, again, because I work with men so much, I'll speak to the men, but we wrestle with this because there is this lone wolf mentality that a lot of men struggle with. And
sure.
we think, well, we're just going to figure this out on our own. And, I'm going to grind it out. And when I bring my head up, y'all will see.
Yep.
And I get it, and I think that some people think there's a sort of nobility in that, of like, I'm a self-made man. I'm a fill in the blank. No one is a self-made man, for the record. If you believe that, it's a fallacy.
Yep.
But I would say the lone wolf dies alone.
Yeah,
Strong wolves build packs.
for sure.
And the challenging thing is it's hard to fight that because it requires us to lay our egos down. It requires us to lay our pride aside, and to say, I could really use some extra feedback or some help. So let me give you some context. Um, I was floundering in this point in my life because all I'd known was these leadership positions, and I ended up doing general contracting, working as a laborer, and I was working on this guy's house, and he multiple properties, multiple businesses, very wealthy man, rolled up in his Porsche, but he seemed to be a really nice guy. I was literally carrying a bucket of bricks
Yeah.
when I came up to talk to him. And I said, hey, his name was Richard. I said, hey, Richard, I know we don't know each other that well. I'm just a laborer working on your house. But I'm like, you seem like you've done very well financially. And I admire you, man. You have a beautiful family. Would you be willing to, and this is a bit of a moonshot, but would you be willing to connect with me and just maybe once a quarter or once a month, grab a coffee, grab a beer? I would love to learn from you.
Wow.
How did you acquire this wealth? How did you do this? And he looked at me, and I'll never forget it. Like, it took me forever to get the courage to choke at the words. And he looked at me, he said,
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to. And I was
Wow.
like, and in fact, he said, when works for you?
Wow. Well, kudos on both of you. Just to have the courage to do that. That's not
No.
those folks. I was a painter for 20 years. I worked on a lot of really wealthy folks' homes, and most of these guys, they roll up and they've got this, presence and, people around them and all these things. But you come to find out if you're just a regular person and you just treat everybody the same, a lot of them are just regular humans, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and he taught me this, and I've actually built a framework around it. I call it the Iron Five. So every one of my clients, everyone in my community has their own Iron Five, which is their 5 men who surround them, which we can
Nice.
break down a little later if you want. But essentially, what he taught me was he said, listen, Mitchell, has anyone ever asked you for advice? I said, yeah, for sure. He said, how did that make you feel? I said, well, felt good. I was humbled, flattered. He said, well, would you have actually even gone out of your way to make time to meet with this person who asked for your advice? I said, yeah, sure, because I love to help. So he said, well, what makes you think you're any different for reaching out to anyone else for help, right? Like you reached out to me. And that's the thing, Joe, is our pride gets in the way, or we think that we're going to be a burden, right? But here's the thing. Anyone who's ahead of you in their marriage, their finances, and the fitness and the mindset, you name it, they understand how much it takes to get to where you want to go. And so
Right.
they're not going to criticize you. The only people who are going to criticize you are the people that are well behind you.
Right.
You know what? Those might be haters, they might be victims, whatever, but they're not going to be where you're going, so it doesn't matter,
Exactly.
right? So
It's relevant to you. Yeah.
exactly, reach up, reach out, and have those men rally around you, or if you're listening, you're a woman, women rally around you, and to show you what's possible. And that, there's so much there's a lot more nuance to it than that. But at the end of the day, you don't have to get into like a community like mine, or hire me as a coach or whatever. You could simply just reach out into your circle, and that's all I did. I looked at around my circle. I said, who has the best marriage that I know? Who has who's in the best shape that I know? Who's the most wealthy that I know in my own sphere of influence? And then I found those 5 guys, and I just reached out like that. And
Nice.
I tell you what, they weren't like these crazy high level people, but they were quite a few steps ahead of me. And
Right.
they gave me the starting steps. They gave me
love
the
it.
places to begin. And then from there on, I took it forward, right? And here I am today. But it all starts with that decision. And that, at the end of the day, Joe, is ownership. That's ownership,
Exactly.
right? Saying like my moment at the funeral was like, you know what? My wife is not going to take the bottle from me. My kids aren't going to take the cell phone from me, or the Netflix controller or whatever. I realize that there's never going to be a pack of leaders at the cheerleader or at the gym, a pack of cheerleaders at the gym parking lot cheering me on to be there to work out. It's not going to happen. I got to take ownership, and
Yeah.
it's always going to be challenging. And so until I learn that the cavalry is not coming, that I have to take ownership, then nothing's ever going to change. Because we know that 95% of the decision, and this is evidence, we know that 95% of the decisions we make today are the same as the ones we made yesterday. So we live the vast majority of our lives on autopilot. And this is why, going back to what you mentioned in the beginning of the episode, this is why we just wake up one day and all of a sudden it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years. And so what you need to do is take those thoughts captive and get out of that rut and be like, what does it look like to take ownership, to get present, to get focused on where I'm going? Because if I don't, no one's going to do it for me. And if I don't, I'm going to wake up 10 years from now and wonder why I am where I am. Because that's just a reality. And so that's what I would encourage your listeners with this morning.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about your program. I know we're getting a little low on time, and I want to understand, you've talked about so many amazing points, and humility and ownership. I think accountability is a gigantic part of all of this. And there's some tools that I've used about, looking at the future to, how do I know what I want to be, and identifying those things. It all boils down to decisions, and it sounds to me like you've got a pretty well thought out program, and usually there are sort of pillars of support that cause this program to be what it is. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could tell you, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you about how I serve men, the different offerings I have. But first, let me explain to you one of the first places I start with men, because if you're listening to this today, you can take this and use it for yourself. One of my clients called me up before I hired him. He was in tears, and he said, this guy's 7-figure earner, multimillionaire. And he calls me, he says, he's in tears, and he's like, I just found out that my wife has a bunch of runaway money saved up. She's got a down payment on another place, and she's going to take the girls. He said, I drink about a dozen beers a day. I'm pre-diabetic. And he's like, when my wife gets home from work, I go to my own room and I drink myself to sleep. And he's like, what? Like, what is wrong with me? And we started having this. So he hired me. We started having the conversation. And I said to him, Mark, what do you want? He said, I don't know. And I'll tell you, Joe, 90% of the guys I talk to can't answer that question.
Right.
So then the next question was, well, let's actually determine what that is. And so one of the first things I do with my clients is I get them to write their own eulogy from the perspective of their wife, right? Or their children. Okay. And this is called beginning with the end in mind. Napoleon Hill talks about this.
I recognize that. Yeah,
exactly. We begin with the end in mind. And so and in my funeral moment, that's exactly what the minister asked that question. And all of a sudden I had a flash to the end of my life. And so what we do is we say, okay, if you were to die today, I want you to picture your wife standing over your casket. It sounds a little bit morbid, but it's very visceral and powerful.
Yeah.
And I want you to write the eulogy for her. What would she say about the husband you were, the father you were, about the employer you were, about you name it. And then let's write a 2.0 version. And now, if you were every bit the man that you were called to be, that you were living at 100% of your potential, what would she say about you then? And let's identify those gaps, because that gap between who you are right now and who you want to be, that's where your attention lies. That's where your frustration is, right? And so that's where we begin. And then basically, and it's always like, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better husband. I want to, be more present, all those different things, whatever. So going back to this question with Mark, I said, well, these are the things that you want. These are what you say you want, but this is what your actions say you want. Your actions say you work 16 hours a day. Your actions say work is more important than your wife.
Right.
Your actions say your cell phone is more important than your kids because you're usually on that instead of playing with them on the toy mat. You know, your actions say Big Macs are more important to you than your fitness because you eat more burgers than you do train your physical body.
Yep.
So why is it that your actions are actually not in alignment with what you say you want? And that's the journey we start. We start aligning what our current actions are with the things that we said we wanted.
Nice.
And we don't get that clarity until we go right to the end. And we say, hey, when you're going to be because there's a 100% chance that you're going to draw your last breath, right? Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it's going to happen to every one of us. Yep.
So what do you want to be the thoughts in the last few moments you're breathing? Do you want them to have regret, be filled with regret, or do you want to be filled with gratitude?
Right.
Because you get to choose. So let's now reverse engineer that into today. Daily action steps and strategies to become that man. Does that make sense?
It makes great sense.
So that's kind of where I would start with a lot of my clients, right? We
I like it. I like it. I really align with your thinking. You found out some things at a point in your life that I hadn't even begun to consider till I got a whole lot older. So I've seems that we've walked along some of the same roads. I was just 20 years in front of you age-wise, but it's all good. I am really grateful that you're doing what you're doing. How does your call it practice work? Do people come to you in person? Is it virtually? Both? How do you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking, Joe. I tell people I serve men 3 different ways. So real simple, 3 C's. Okay. First one is the content. So it's the Dad Nation podcast. It's simple. You can listen, whatever. The second one is courses, which I have an online program called the High Performance Husband, which is really everything that I teach my one-to-one clients. It's just in an online digital program, self-guided, right? Now that's good if you want to kick the tires, but the best option is the third C, which is coaching. Now we do group coaching. It's called the Dad Nation Coalition. And we meet every 2 weeks and we have group coaching calls and we do have conversations just like this where we come in, I teach a framework, a concept, and then we have some conversation around it. We break out into rooms and discuss and apply it in real time. Anyone who's in the community also gets access to all the other stuff, like the course I mentioned. And then for the right person who really wants to go to the next level, I offer one-to-one coaching as well. But that's typically what my services look like. So wherever you are on that spectrum, whether you want a free podcast to listen to, or if you want to go all the way to invest in yourself and back yourself financially, then we can have that conversation about what it looks like to work one-on-one or in a group setting with you.
Fantastic. Well, we're running about out of time, but I am just, as I suspected, this was a great conversation and it opens the door to further ones. I would love to have you come back sometime and maybe go deep on a conversation on a topic. And, I like to have the first interview just sort of wide open doors, see where we go. But most of my guests have a profound experience with some of these things, and to go deep into a specific topic sometimes can really have a special effect and meaning. So I'd love to invite you back to do that one day.
Yeah, of course. And you know what, just if you're okay with this, I'd love to give your listeners a free gift if that's okay.
Absolutely. Today. Sure.
Yeah, so as we talked about, a lot of men wrestle in marriage and really in the context of emotions, right? A lot of women, I know I heard it for years, I feel like I'm married to a robot, and women need to be connected with emotionally. And so what I did is I created, after coaching all these men, I've created something called the connection code. And all this is 50 questions that are strategically designed to spark the fun and bring the fire back in your relationship. So if you feel like you went from soulmates to roommates, this is for you. And It's totally free. And the only rule is whether it's you go out on a date night or you put the kids down and pour up a glass of wine, you just take 3 or 4 questions off this list and ask your partner. And it's gonna just help you connect with her so much deeper than you were before. I get emails from women all the time saying like, who is this man that took me out? And these questions, it's been amazing. So totally free for you. And I'll give you the link, but this is dadnationcode.com/code. And if you could put the link in the show notes, just
I
grab
certainly
it.
will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you give us your website again and any other contact, and we will include all that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, man. Yeah, the website is just dadnationco.com. And if you just Google that, or if you just Google the Dad Nation podcast, you'll find my website there. Or like I said, the connection code. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, but if you just search for the Dad Nation or Mitchell Osmond, you'll find me there.
I love it. Well, Mitchell, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm respect deeply the work you're doing. It's needed. It's important, and you're living your life's calling. I'm proud and pleased to know you.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really honor you for what you're doing, and I love the mission you're on. Thank you for your time. I just had such a great time as well. So appreciate you, man, and let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, this has been another edition of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and I appreciate all the support, and we will see you next. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.